Olivia Carter watches in horror as her baby turns blue at 35,000 feet. The flight attendant refuses her desperate pleas for help, sneering, "Your kind always overreacts." Little does this crew know, Olivia's husband Marcus is about to bring down their entire airline empire. Before I dive into this shocking true story, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever witnessed discrimination that made your blood boil. The airline industry will never be the same after what happened next. Olivia and Marcus Carter had spent months planning their perfect family getaway to Paris. As first-time parents to 6-month-old Zora, they wanted everything to be special. This wasn't just any vacation. It was a celebration of their journey together and the beautiful family they had created despite countless obstacles. Marcus had built an impressive career as a business attorney in Chicago, specializing in corporate accountability cases that had earned him recognition throughout the legal community. His expertise in holding powerful companies responsible for their actions had recently caught the attention of Skyway Airlines, one of the country's largest carriers. They were actively courting his firm to handle their corporate travel accounts, a multi-million-dollar partnership that would cement his status at his firm. Olivia, a dedicated pediatric nurse currently on maternity leave, had supported Marcus through law school while building her own career. Her natural compassion and medical knowledge made her exceptional with young patients, and she approached motherhood with the same loving care she showed at the hospital. "We deserve this," Marcus told Olivia as they finalized their booking for first-class seats on Skyway's premier international route. After all those all-nighters in school, all those double shifts at the hospital, and now juggling careers with a baby, Paris is calling our names. Their love story had begun in college, where they met during a campus fundraiser for educational equality. Both from working-class backgrounds, they had overcome significant financial hurdles to attend university. They bonded over shared ambitions and values, becoming inseparable study partners before romance blossomed. Through graduation, career beginnings, marriage, and now parenthood, they had faced each challenge as a united front. The morning of their departure arrived with perfect June weather. Their Chicago apartment buzzed with last-minute packing and excitement. Baby Zora, with her bright eyes and contagious smile, seemed to sense the adventure ahead, cooing happily as Olivia dressed her in a special outfit for the flight. "First international trip for our little global citizen," Olivia said, kissing Zora's chubby cheeks. The baby gurgled with delight, grabbing at her mother's braids with tiny fingers. Marcus checked their documentation one final time. Passports, boarding passes, hotel confirmations, and the extensive list of baby supplies they'd need. As an attorney, his attention to detail was impeccable. As a new father, that same trait had intensified tenfold. "Skyway's VIP check-in should make this smooth," he said. "The perks of possibly bringing them millions in business." He winked at Olivia, who smiled back while securing Zora in her carrier. Their optimism began to fade when they arrived at O'Hare International Airport. At the priority check-in counter designated for first-class passengers, the agent looked at them with visible surprise. "First class to Paris?" The agent's eyebrows raised as she glanced between their boarding passes and their faces. "I'll need to see your passports again." Marcus kept his expression neutral, though Olivia noticed the muscle twitching in his jaw, a telltale sign of his contained frustration. This wasn't new to them. The subtle questioning of their presence in premium spaces had become a familiar, if unwelcome, occurrence. After verifying their documentation twice, the agent reluctantly processed their check-in, explaining the first-class lounge location with noticeably less enthusiasm than she had shown to the white couple before them. "Just another day," Marcus whispered to Olivia as they walked away. She squeezed his hand in silent understanding. The premium lounge provided a temporary respite. Zora remained content, captivating several elderly travelers who commented on her beautiful smile and expressive eyes. For a brief moment, the Carters relaxed, enjoying the amenities and anticipating the journey ahead. Boarding began with the usual call for passengers needing assistance and those traveling with small children. Marcus gathered their belongings, while Olivia secured Zora in her carrier. As they approached the priority boarding lane, another hurdle emerged. "This line is for first-class passengers only," the gate agent stated flatly, despite the clearly visible first-class boarding passes in Marcus's hand. "Yes, I'm aware," Marcus replied calmly, presenting their documents. "That's why we're here." The agent's expression shifted subtly as she scanned their passes. Without an apology for the assumption, she waved them forward. Once aboard the sleek Boeing 787, they located their spacious first-class pods near the front of the aircraft. Olivia settled Zora while Marcus stored their carry-ons. The baby remained surprisingly calm, fascinated by the new environment. Their designated flight attendant, Jessica Whitman, approached with a practiced smile that didn't reach her eyes. Tall, blonde, and impeccably groomed, her demeanor cooled visibly upon seeing who occupied the premium seats. "You're in first class," she stated rather than asked, her tone carrying an unmistakable note of suspicion. "Yes, we are," Marcus replied evenly, handing over their boarding passes for unnecessary verification. Jessica's perfunctory service continued as she offered pre-departure beverages to other first-class passengers with warm conversation and personalized attention. When she reached the Carters, her approach was strictly transactional. "Water, or juice?" she asked, without the offer of champagne extended to others. "Orange juice for my wife, sparkling water for me," Marcus replied, maintaining his composure. Olivia marveled at his patience, a professional skill honed from years of tense negotiations. As the plane prepared for takeoff, Olivia administered a bottle to help ease Zora's ear pressure during ascent. The baby took it happily, her wide brown eyes curiously watching the activities around her. "She's such a good traveler," Olivia whispered to Marcus as the engines roared to life. "Maybe we've got a future explorer on our hands." He smiled, watching his daughter with unconcealed adoration. The world better get ready for Zora Carter. The initial ascent went smoothly. Zora remained comfortable, eventually drifting to sleep, against her mother's chest as the plane climbed to cruising altitude. Olivia allowed herself to relax, leaning back in her plush seat and envisioning their arrival in the City of Light. Jessica continued her pattern of differential service, spending extra time chatting with the other first-class passengers, while providing only the minimum required attention to the Carters. When she delivered their meals, the difference was subtle but unmistakable. Less care in the presentation, shorter descriptions of the options, and a noticeable absence of the warmth she showed others. "Don't let it ruin our trip, Olivia," murmured to Marcus after Jessica walked away. "We've dealt with worse." "True," he agreed, squeezing her hand. "And Paris will be worth it." Little did they know that Jessica's behavior was merely the first indication of a much more serious problem, one that would transform their dream vacation into a nightmare at 35,000 feet and ultimately change the course of their lives and the entire airline industry. Approximately 2 hours into the transatlantic flight, baby Zora began to stir in her sleep. What started as mild fussiness quickly escalated to distressed crying that seemed different from her usual hunger or discomfort sounds. Olivia, with a mother's intuition sharpened by her pediatric nursing experience, immediately sensed something was wrong. "She feels warm," Olivia whispered to Marcus, placing a gentle hand on Zora's forehead. The baby's skin radiated heat that hadn't been present when she'd fallen asleep. Her cries grew more insistent, taking on a pained quality that sent alarm bells ringing through Olivia's mind. Marcus pressed the call button, keeping his expression calm despite his growing concern. Several minutes passed before Jessica appeared, her annoyance barely concealed. "Yes?" she asked, glancing at the still crying Zora with evident disapproval. "Our daughter seems to be running a fever," Olivia explained professionally. "Do you have a thermometer in your medical kit? I'd like to check her temperature." Jessica's lips thinned into a tight line. Babies cry. That's what they do, especially on planes. It disturbs other passengers. Olivia took a steadying breath. "I understand that, but I'm concerned she may be ill. I'm a pediatric nurse and this crying isn't normal for her." "Everyone thinks their situation is special," Jessica replied dismissively. "Just try to keep her quiet. We have other passengers trying to rest." With that, she turned and walked away without addressing their request for a thermometer. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice low. "I'll try again in a minute. Maybe she's just having a bad day." "This isn't about having a bad day," Olivia responded, her nursing assessment continuing as she examined Zora. "She's definitely feverish, and her breathing seems faster than normal." Over the next 20 minutes, Zora's condition deteriorated. Her crying became more labored, interspersed with concerning wheezing sounds. Olivia removed the baby's outer layers to cool her down, noticing a faint rash beginning to appear on her chest and neck. Marcus pressed the call button again. This time, a different flight attendant approached, a younger man named Daniel, but Jessica intercepted him, speaking in hushed tones before coming over herself. "Is there a problem?" she asked, her tone making clear that she believed the only problem was their continued requests for assistance. "Yes, there is," Marcus said firmly, his professional demeanor in full effect. "Our daughter's condition is worsening. She needs medical attention. At minimum, we need access to the plane's medical kit." "Sir, I'm trained to recognize actual medical emergencies, and this appears to be a fussy baby," Jessica replied. "Perhaps you should try some basic parenting techniques before assuming the worst." Olivia noticed a white couple across the aisle, whose toddler had been crying intermittently throughout the flight. Jessica had been nothing but solicitous with them, offering suggestions, extra snacks, and even taking the child for a brief walk down the aisle to give the parents a break. "My wife is a pediatric nurse," Marcus stated, his voice maintaining its calm despite the storm brewing behind his eyes. "When she says our daughter needs medical attention, that's not an overreaction." Jessica's posture stiffened. "You need to control your child. You're in first class and this display is inappropriate." As they spoke, Olivia noticed with mounting horror that Zora's lips were developing a subtle bluish tint, and her crying had weakened to whimpering. Years of emergency room experience crystallized into absolute certainty. Her baby was in serious distress. "She's showing signs of cyanosis," Olivia interjected urgently, medical terminology replacing maternal panic. "This is a legitimate emergency. I need the medical kit now, and the captain needs to know we may require an emergency landing." Jessica's expression shifted from annoyance to something harder. "Your kind always overreacts to everything. I've been flying for 15 years, and I know what a medical emergency looks like." The blatant racism in her statement hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Several nearby passengers looked up in shock, including Daniel, who hovered uncomfortably behind Jessica, clearly conflicted. "What did you just say to my wife?" Marcus asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Before Jessica could respond, Olivia broke in, her focus solely on her increasingly lethargic child. "My baby is having trouble breathing. I don't care about anything else right now. Get me the medical kit and notify the captain, or I promise you'll be responsible for what happens next." Jessica's face flushed with anger. "Are you threatening me? That's a federal offense. I could have you arrested upon landing. And I could sue this airline for negligence and discrimination if you don't get me that medical kit right now," Marcus countered, his legal mind documenting every word of the exchange, even as his heart raced with fear for his daughter. Throughout this escalating confrontation, Zora's condition continued to deteriorate. Her whimpering had nearly stopped, her breathing becoming more labored. The bluish tint around her lips was spreading, and her normally vibrant brown skin had taken on an ashen quality that terrified her parents. "Please," Olivia implored, her professional composure cracking as tears filled her eyes. "Whatever you think of us, my baby needs help." Jessica looked down at the struggling infant. Hesitation, finally crossing her features, but instead of relenting, she doubled down. "I think you're being dramatic. If there was a real emergency, other passengers would notice." As if on cue, an elderly white woman across the aisle leaned forward. "That baby doesn't look right," she commented, concern evident in her voice. "Shouldn't you do something?" Jessica's mouth tightened. "Ma'am, I have the situation under control." Daniel, still watching from behind Jessica, made eye contact with Olivia. Something in her desperate expression seemed to reach him, and he slipped away silently toward the front galley. Marcus, seeing Zora's worsening state, made a quick decision. He pulled out his phone and began recording, documenting Jessica's refusal to provide medical assistance. "What do you think you're doing?" Jessica demanded. "Recording is not permitted during—" "I'm documenting a flight attendant's refusal to provide emergency medical assistance to an infant in respiratory distress," Marcus interrupted, his attorney voice in full effect. "For the record, my wife has repeatedly requested the plane's medical kit, which you are required by FAA regulations to provide in case of in-flight medical emergencies." Several more passengers had begun to take notice of the situation, murmuring among themselves. The contrast between Jessica's treatment of the Carters and her attentive service to other passengers had not gone unobserved. As Zora's breathing became increasingly labored, Olivia felt a terror unlike anything she'd experienced before. All her medical training seemed insufficient in the face of her own child's distress without proper equipment or medication. She continued basic assessments, checking Zora's pulse and respiratory rate, feeling increasingly helpless as the numbers worsened. "Please," she whispered, no longer certain if she was addressing Jessica, God, or the universe itself. "Please help my baby." Zora's sudden silence struck Olivia like physical blow. The baby's previous whimpering had ceased entirely, replaced by an eerie quiet that any medical professional would recognize as a dire warning sign. Lethargy in an infant who had been crying moments before wasn't improvement. It was often the last stage before complete respiratory failure. "Marcus," Olivia's voice trembled as she fought to maintain composure. "She's not responding normally. This is critical." Marcus immediately stood up, his imposing 6'3" frame commanding attention. "I need to speak to the captain now." His voice carried through the first-class cabin, causing several passengers to turn in their seats. Jessica stepped into his path, her expression hardening. "Sir, return to your seat immediately. You're being disruptive, and I can have you arrested upon landing for interfering with a flight crew." "My daughter is in respiratory distress while you deny medical assistance," Marcus replied, his phone still recording. "I'd welcome explaining that to the authorities." "What would you do if someone refused to help your child in an emergency? Would you stay calm like Marcus, or demand action more forcefully?" Comment number 1 if you think Marcus should have been more aggressive, or number 2 if his measured approach was right. Don't forget to like and subscribe to see how this shocking situation unfolds. Olivia, channeling years of emergency room experience, performed a rapid assessment of Zora's condition. The baby's respiratory rate had dropped dangerously. Her skin was taking on a more pronounced bluish tint, and her normally vibrant eyes had become dull and unfocused. Working quickly, Olivia positioned Zora to open her airway maximally, checking for any visible obstruction. Finding none, she began gentle, tactile stimulation, rubbing her daughter's chest and speaking to her in an urgent, loving voice. "Stay with me, baby girl. Mommy's here. Stay with me." The commotion had drawn attention throughout the first-class cabin. A middle-aged white man in a business suit stood from his seat across the aisle and approached with purposeful steps. "Excuse me," he said, his voice carrying authority. "I'm Dr. Richard Keller, emergency physician from Boston General. May I help?" Jessica immediately pivoted, her demeanor transforming instantly. "Doctor, thank you for offering. We have a situation with an infant." "I can see that," Dr. Keller replied, already moving toward Olivia and Zora. "I'd like to examine the child, with the parents' permission, of course." "Please," Olivia nodded, frantically. "She's showing signs of respiratory distress, possible anaphylaxis. I'm a pediatric nurse, but I need equipment." Dr. Keller turned to Jessica. "I'll need the emergency medical kit immediately." Without hesitation, Jessica replied, "Of course, doctor. I'll get it right away." She hurried toward the front galley, returning moments later with the plane's medical kit, which she handed directly to Dr. Keller without acknowledging Olivia or Marcus. The contrast between her immediate compliance with the white doctor's request and her previous dismissal of Olivia's identical plea was stark. Several passengers exchanged knowing glances, the discrimination impossible to ignore. Dr. Keller opened the kit and quickly assessed its contents. "Based on the symptoms, this looks like an anaphylactic reaction. How old is she?" 6 months, Olivia answered, her medical training kicking in despite her maternal panic. No known allergies, no previous episodes. She was fine until about 30 minutes ago. The doctor nodded, examining Zora with gentle efficiency. Has she been exposed to any new foods or substances today? Olivia's mind raced. No new foods, just her regular formula. Wait, there was a new airline snack that fell on her blanket. I wiped it off, but she might have gotten some on her hands and then to her mouth. That could be it, Dr. Keller confirmed. She's definitely showing signs of anaphylaxis. We need to act quickly. He turned to Jessica. I need you to inform the captain that we have a medical emergency involving an infant. We may need to divert for emergency medical attention. Jessica hesitated, looking conflicted. Are you certain it's that serious? Diversions are extremely costly to the airline. Dr. Keller's expression hardened. More costly than a child's life? Yes, it's that serious. Inform the captain immediately. As Jessica reluctantly moved toward the cockpit, Dr. Keller prepared a pediatric dose of epinephrine from the emergency kit. This will help open her airways, he explained to the parents. The dose is very small for her weight, but it should help until we can get her to a hospital. Olivia held Zora steady as Dr. Keller administered the medication. Marcus stood nearby, still recording, his attorney's mind methodically documenting every moment of the unfolding crisis, even as his heart raced with paternal fear. After what seemed like an eternity, but was actually less than a minute, Zora's breathing began to ease. The bluish tint around her lips gradually receded, and her eyes regained some of their alertness. She's responding well, Dr. Keller confirmed, continuing to monitor her vital signs. But she'll need proper medical evaluation and observation. Anaphylaxis can sometimes have a biphasic response, with symptoms returning after the initial treatment. Relief flooded through Olivia, tears finally breaking free as she cradled her recovering daughter. Thank you, she whispered to Dr. Keller. If you hadn't been here. Your assessment was correct from the beginning, he replied firmly. You identified the emergency immediately. You should have been listened to. Jessica returned from the cockpit. The captain has contacted air traffic control. We're being diverted to Gander International Airport in Newfoundland. ETA 23 minutes. Good, Dr. Keller nodded. I'll stay with the patient until we land. Jessica stood awkwardly for a moment before attempting to regain control of the situation. I'll need to prepare the cabin for our unscheduled landing. As she turned to leave, Dr. Keller stopped her. I'd like to know why you ignored a medical professional's assessment of this emergency. Mrs. Carter identified the symptoms correctly and requested the appropriate intervention. Minutes matter in anaphylaxis, especially in infants. Jessica's face flushed. I was following company procedures for assessing medical situations. Does your company procedure include dismissing parents because of their race? Asked an elderly woman seated nearby who had witnessed the entire exchange. Because that's what it looked like to me. Jessica's expression hardened. That's absolutely not what happened. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to secure the cabin for landing. She walked briskly away, avoiding eye contact with the growing number of passengers watching the situation unfold. Daniel, the younger flight attendant who had observed Jessica's earlier behavior, approached cautiously with a cup of water for Olivia. I'm so sorry, he whispered, barely audible. I tried to tell the captain earlier, but she intercepted me. Marcus nodded slightly in acknowledgement, still recording. The brief exchange didn't escape the notice of several nearby passengers, who were becoming increasingly vocal about what they had witnessed. I heard everything, said a businessman seated behind the Carters. That was blatant discrimination. You should sue the airline. I'd be happy to provide a statement, added another passenger. The atmosphere in the first-class cabin had transformed completely. What had begun as a routine transatlantic flight had become a case study in discrimination, medical negligence, and now potential legal action. The dividing lines were clear, with most passengers expressing support for the Carters and indignation at Jessica's behavior. As Zora continued to improve under Dr. Keller's watchful eye, Marcus turned his attention to the legal implications of what had transpired. As a specialist in corporate accountability, he recognized the elements of a significant case, negligence, discrimination, potential violation of federal aviation regulations, and most importantly, documented evidence of it all. What had started as a dream family vacation had become something entirely different. The beginning of what would prove to be a landmark case against one of the nation's largest airlines, and a turning point in how corporations would be held accountable for discriminatory practices. The overhead speakers crackled to life with the captain's voice. Ladies and gentlemen, as you may be aware, we have a medical situation on board. We'll be landing at Gander International Airport in Newfoundland in approximately 20 minutes. Please return to your seats and secure all loose items. As the plane began its descent, Olivia held Zora close, the baby's breathing now much improved, though still requiring monitoring. Marcus reached over to squeeze his wife's hand, their eyes meeting in a silent exchange that communicated everything. Relief that their daughter was recovering, gratitude for Dr. Keller's intervention, and a shared resolve that what had happened would not go unchallenged. What Jessica and Skyway Airlines didn't realize was that they had discriminated against the exact wrong family: a pediatric nurse who could identify medical malpractice, an attorney specializing in corporate accountability with the resources to pursue justice, and witnesses who were willing to stand up for what was right. The wheels of justice were already in motion, even as the plane's wheels prepared to touch down on the emergency landing strip in Newfoundland. Should airlines be held accountable when their staff discriminate against passengers? Comment number 1 if you believe companies should face serious consequences, or number 2 if you think individual employees alone should be responsible. Subscribe now to see how the Carters take on a corporate giant in the next part of this shocking true
story.
The plane touched down at Gander International Airport with a jarring thud, the pilot prioritizing speed over comfort in the emergency landing. Within minutes of reaching the gate, the cabin door opened to reveal a waiting medical team, alerted by the pilot's emergency notification. 2 paramedics boarded immediately, making their way to the first-class cabin where Dr. Keller was still monitoring Zora's condition. 6-month-old female, apparent anaphylactic reaction, responded well to pediatric dose epinephrine approximately 25 minutes ago, Dr. Keller reported professionally. Breathing stabilized but continued monitoring required. One paramedic began examining Zora while the other gathered information from Olivia. Any known allergies? Previous reactions? None, Olivia answered, her nurse's training helping her remain clinical despite her emotional exhaustion. This is her first incident. It appears to have been triggered by an airline snack that accidentally contacted her skin and possibly her mouth. The paramedic nodded, taking notes. We'll transport her to James Peyton Memorial Hospital for observation and further treatment. One parent can ride in the ambulance. I'll go, Olivia said immediately. Marcus, can you handle things here? Marcus nodded, his expression conveying his complete support. I'll take care of everything and join you as soon as possible. As the paramedics prepared to transfer Zora to a portable carrier, Canadian border, officials arrived to address the international arrival protocols. Given the emergency circumstances, they expedited the process, allowing Olivia to accompany her daughter to the hospital, while Marcus would complete the necessary documentation. Jessica stood near the cockpit, speaking in hushed tones with the captain. When she noticed the officials taking statements from passengers about the incident, her posture stiffened visibly. The situation was handled according to company protocol, she insisted when approached by a Canadian transportation safety officer. The parents were agitated, making it difficult to assess the actual severity of the situation. Dr. Keller, overhearing this characterization, stepped forward. That is categorically false. Mrs. Carter, a pediatric nurse, correctly identified her daughter's symptoms and requested appropriate medical intervention, which was repeatedly denied, until I intervened. The elderly passenger who had spoken up earlier nodded vigorously. The flight attendant ignored them completely until this doctor said the exact same thing. It was shameful. The businessman behind the Carter's seats added, "She made a comment about, 'Your kind always overreacting.' I heard it clearly." Jessica's face flushed. "These accusations are completely unfounded. I responded appropriately to what appeared to be a non-emergency situation." Daniel, who had been quietly assisting other passengers, caught Marcus's eye briefly before looking away. His discomfort was palpable, the internal conflict evident on his face. As Olivia departed with the paramedics and Zora, Marcus found himself surrounded by supportive passengers offering their contact information as potential witnesses. He collected their details methodically, his attorney's mind already building the framework of a case even as his heart ached to be with his family. The Canadian officials, recognizing the seriousness of the situation, ensured all relevant witness statements were properly documented before allowing the passengers to proceed to the terminal. The unscheduled landing had created logistical challenges that would require hours to resolve before the flight could continue to Paris. In the terminal, Marcus was approached by a sharply dressed woman who introduced herself as Veronica Pearson, Skyway Airlines Regional Crisis Management Director. "Mr. Carter, on behalf of Skyway Airlines, I want to express our deepest concerns about your daughter's medical emergency," she began, her tone professionally sympathetic. "We're arranging accommodations for all passengers while the flight is delayed, but of course your family's situation is our priority." "My priority is joining my wife and daughter at the hospital," Marcus replied evenly. "I'll need transportation." "Of course," Veronica nodded. "We've arranged for a car service, and I want you to know that Skyway takes customer safety extremely seriously. We'll be conducting a thorough review of this incident." "I recorded most of it," Marcus stated flatly, "including your flight attendant's refusal to provide medical assistance and her discriminatory comments." Veronica's professional smile faltered momentarily. "Mr. Carter, I understand this has been extremely stressful. If there were any misunderstandings or if our service fell short of expectations, we want to make it right. Skyway values all our customers and absolutely prohibits any form of discrimination." "This wasn't a misunderstanding or poor service," Marcus countered. "It was medical negligence and racial discrimination that endangered my daughter's life." Veronica's expression shifted subtly to damage control mode. "We should discuss this privately. Skyway would like to offer compensation for your distress and any medical expenses incurred. We value your family's business and want to resolve this situation amicably." "My daughter is still being treated at the hospital. This isn't the time to discuss settlements," Marcus replied coldly. "Of course," Veronica backpedaled smoothly. "But when you're ready, we have a generous compensation package prepared, requiring only a standard confidentiality agreement." Marcus, whose legal career had made him intimately familiar with such tactics, simply stated, "I'll be in touch with your legal department directly. Now, about that transportation to the hospital?" Recognizing she wouldn't make progress at that moment, Veronica arranged for the promised car service. As Marcus prepared to depart, Daniel approached hesitantly. "Mr. Carter," he said quietly, glancing around to ensure Jessica wasn't nearby. "I just wanted to say, what happened wasn't right. Jessica has a history of similar incidents. They always get swept under the rug." Marcus assessed the young man carefully. "Would you be willing to provide a formal statement about that?" Daniel looked conflicted. "I need this job, but what happened to your baby?" He pulled out his phone, bringing up a video. "I recorded part of it, when Jessica refused to help and made that comment. I'll send it to you." This unexpected evidence was a significant development. "Thank you," Marcus said sincerely. "This could make a real difference." At James Peyton Memorial Hospital, Olivia sat beside Zora's crib in the pediatric observation unit. The local doctors had confirmed Dr. Keller's diagnosis of anaphylaxis, likely triggered by tree nuts in the airline snack that had contaminated Zora's blanket. "She's stable now," the attending physician reassured Olivia. "But we'd like to keep her overnight for observation, standard protocol for infant anaphylaxis cases." Olivia nodded gratefully, the professional part of her understanding the medical necessity, while the mother in her simply thanked God her baby was breathing normally again. Zora had regained her usual alertness, though she remained tired from the ordeal. When Marcus arrived, the relief on Olivia's face was palpable. They embraced tightly, the day's terror finally catching up to them both. "She's going to be okay," Olivia whispered, tears streaming down her face. if that doctor hadn't been there. But he was, Marcus reminded her gently. And you knew exactly what was happening. You did everything right, Liv. As Zora slept peacefully in her hospital crib, Marcus updated Olivia on the aftermath at the airport, including Daniel's video and the numerous passengers offering to serve as witnesses. Skyway's already trying to buy our silence, he added, describing his interaction with Veronica. Standard corporate playbook, quick settlement, non-disclosure agreement, problem disappears. Olivia's expression hardened. They nearly let our baby die because of their racism. Money can't fix that. No, it can't, Marcus agreed. But accountability might help prevent it from happening to someone else's child. Their conversation was interrupted by a notification on Marcus's phone. A news alert mentioning their flight's emergency landing. The initial reporting described it merely as a medical emergency involving an infant passenger, with no mention of the discrimination or denied assistance. They're already controlling the narrative, Marcus observed, scrolling through the article. Minimal details, emphasis on the airline's swift response to the medical situation. Swift response? Olivia repeated incredulously. They refused to help until a white doctor demanded it. Before they could discuss further, Marcus received a call from his law firm's managing partner, concerned after seeing the news about their flight. We're all fine, Marcus assured him, providing a brief summary of what had actually occurred. But this is going to develop into a significant case against Skyway. There was a pause before his partner responded cautiously. Marcus, I should remind you that we're in final negotiations with Skyway for their corporate account. Perhaps you should let another firm handle any personal claim. The implication was clear. The firm's business interests might conflict with Marcus pursuing justice for his family. It was the first hint that this fight would have professional consequences beyond what either of them had anticipated. After ending the call, Marcus looked troubled. Olivia, who had overheard his side of the conversation, reached for his hand. This is going to get complicated, isn't it? She asked softly. Yes, Marcus admitted. But some things are more important than business relationships. He glanced at Zora, sleeping peacefully now, her breathing normal and strong. Some things are worth any fight. As night fell over the small Canadian hospital, the Carters remained by their daughter's bedside. Their dream vacation transformed into something entirely different. The beginning of a battle for justice that would challenge a corporate giant, test their own resolve, and ultimately impact how an entire industry addressed discrimination. What they didn't yet realize was how far Skyway would go to protect its reputation, or how many other families had experienced similar discrimination without the resources or platform to fight back. The system that had failed their daughter was about to face unprecedented scrutiny, and the Carters would soon discover they were fighting not just for themselves, but for countless others who had been silenced. 3 days after the emergency landing, the Carter family returned to their Chicago apartment. The remainder of their Paris vacation had been canceled, replaced by a tense journey home aboard a different airline. Zora had recovered physically, the hospital having confirmed a severe allergic reaction to cashews in the airline snack. Olivia, however, found herself jolting awake at night, haunted by images of her baby struggling to breathe while help was callously denied. You're safe, Marcus would whisper, holding them both close in the darkness. We're all safe now. But safety had taken on a new meaning for them. The security they had previously felt, the belief that their education, professionalism, and social standing would shield them from the worst forms of discrimination, had been shattered at 35,000 feet. On the morning of their third day home, Marcus was reviewing the substantial evidence they had gathered. His own recordings, Daniel's video, statements from 8 passengers including Dr. Keller, and medical documentation from both the in-flight emergency and the hospital in Newfoundland. His phone rang, displaying a number he didn't recognize. Marcus Carter speaking, he answered professionally. Mr. Carter, this is Jonathan Pierce, CEO of Skyway Airlines. The voice was smooth, authoritative, and unexpectedly personal. I'm calling to express my sincere regrets regarding the incident involving your family on our Paris flight. Marcus straightened in his chair, attorney mode fully engaged. Mr. Pierce, I appreciate your call, though I'm surprised it took 3 days to reach out. I've been overseas, just returned and was briefed on the situation, Pierce explained. What happened is completely unacceptable, and I'd like to meet with you personally to discuss resolution. I'm preparing to file formal complaints with the FAA and Department of Transportation, Marcus replied evenly. Any discussion should include my legal representation. Of course, Pierce agreed smoothly. However, I believe a private conversation first might be beneficial to all parties. Today at our headquarters, perhaps? I've cleared my afternoon. The invitation to Skyway's corporate headquarters was a power move, bringing Marcus into Pierce's territory rather than meeting on neutral ground. As an attorney who regularly negotiated with corporations, Marcus recognized the tactic immediately. I can be there at 3, he responded, deciding that seeing their operation firsthand might provide valuable insight. After ending the call, he discussed the development with Olivia, who was on extended leave from the hospital to care for Zora. It's a good sign the CEO is involved directly, she noted, gently rocking Zora, who had become more clingy since the incident. But be careful. Companies like Skyway don't admit fault easily. I know their playbook, Marcus assured her. Big settlement offer, strict confidentiality, problem buried. But they picked the wrong family to discriminate against. At precisely 3 o'clock, Marcus arrived at Skyway's gleaming headquarters in downtown Chicago. The 60-story glass tower screamed corporate success, its lobby adorned with models of the airline's fleet and smiling, diverse faces in advertisements that proclaimed Skyway, where everyone belongs. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. An executive assistant greeted him by name before he reached reception, escorting him to a private elevator that whisked them directly to the executive floor. The message was clear. VIP treatment, access to power, an implicit suggestion that he was being taken seriously. The boardroom where Jonathan Pierce waited exuded wealth and influence. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Chicago, while a massive table of polished walnut dominated the space. Pierce wasn't alone. Flanking him were a woman Marcus recognized as general counsel for the airline, and another man whose demeanor screamed, PR executive. Marcus, thank you for coming. Pierce greeted him with practiced warmth, extending his hand. Tall, silver-haired, and impeccably dressed, he projected the confidence of someone accustomed to getting his way. Please, have a seat. Can we offer you anything? Water? Coffee? Water is fine, Marcus replied, maintaining his professional demeanor despite the opulent surroundings designed to impress or intimidate. Once seated, Pierce introduced his companions. This is Victoria Harrington, our general counsel, and James Wright, Senior Vice President of Communications. I wanted them present to ensure we can address all aspects of this unfortunate situation efficiently. Marcus noted the careful language, not inexcusable incident or discriminatory behavior, but unfortunate situation, subtly minimizing what had occurred. First, let me say how relieved we are that your daughter has recovered, Pierce began. Nothing is more important than the safety of our passengers, especially our youngest ones. My daughter nearly died because your employee repeatedly refused medical assistance based on racial bias, Marcus stated directly, setting the tone. Let's not minimize what happened. Pierce's expression remained sympathetic, but controlled. The behavior described is completely contrary to our company values and policies. Jessica Whitman has been placed on administrative leave pending our investigation. Administrative leave, Marcus repeated. Not termination, despite multiple witnesses and video evidence of her denying medical care to an infant while making explicitly discriminatory statements. Victoria Harrington, the general counsel, interjected smoothly. Our employment contracts and union agreements require specific procedural steps. Rest assured, we're taking this extremely seriously. So seriously that your initial press statement described it merely as a medical emergency, with no mention of the denied assistance or discrimination, Marcus countered. James Wright shifted uncomfortably. Initial statements are necessarily limited until we gather all facts. We didn't want to prejudice our internal investigation. Marcus allowed a moment of silence, recognizing the corporate dance for what it was. "What exactly did you want to discuss today, Mr. Pierce?" Pierce leaned forward, his expression earnest. "We want to make this right, Marcus. Your family experienced something no family should ever face on our airline. We're prepared to offer substantial compensation, cover all medical expenses, and provide lifetime premium travel benefits for your entire family." Victoria slid a document across the table. "This settlement offer is significantly above standard compensation for service complaints. We believe it reflects our sincere regret and commitment to resolving this matter amicably." Marcus glanced at the figure, 7 digits, certainly attention-grabbing, but focused instead on the attached confidentiality provisions, which were extensive. "This agreement would prevent us from discussing the incident publicly, filing complaints with regulatory agencies, or participating in any investigation," he noted, attorney to attorney. "Standard confidentiality provisions," Victoria confirmed. "We're offering considerable compensation in exchange for bringing closure to an unfortunate incident." Pierce added, "Marcus, I understand you're currently in discussions to represent our airline for your firm's corporate travel division. This matter shouldn't impact that potential partnership. In fact, I've spoken with your managing partner this morning to assure him of our continued interest." The implication was clear. Pierce was signaling that Marcus's career advancement could be affected by how he handled this personal matter. It was a subtle pressure tactic, reminding Marcus that his professional success was intertwined with corporate relationships. "I'll need to review this with my wife and our own counsel," Marcus responded neutrally. "As you can imagine, this isn't solely about compensation." "Of course," Pierce nodded understandingly. "We're prepared to move quickly whenever you're ready, perhaps within 24 hours. These situations are best resolved promptly." "I'll be in touch tomorrow," Marcus agreed, gathering the documents. The meeting had confirmed what he suspected. Skyway was focused on damage control rather than addressing the underlying discrimination. Upon returning home, Marcus found Olivia in conversation with a woman he didn't recognize. They were seated at the kitchen table, Zora napping peacefully in her carrier nearby. "Marcus, this is Tanya Wilson," Olivia introduced them. "She reached out after seeing a comment I made in a parenting forum about our experience." Tanya, a poised black woman in her early 30s, extended her hand. "Mr. Carter, I experienced something disturbingly similar on a Skyway flight last year. When my son had an asthma attack, Jessica Whitman, the same flight attendant, told me I was being dramatic and delayed getting his inhaler from our stored luggage." Marcus sat down slowly, the implications sinking in. "You're certain it was the same flight attendant?" "Positive," Tanya confirmed. "I filed a complaint, but nothing came of it. They offered me a travel voucher and said they'd look into it. When I saw Olivia's post describing almost identical behavior from the same person, I had to reach out." Olivia explained, "I've received messages from 3 other families since posting about our experience, all black or brown parents, all describing discriminatory treatment on Skyway when their children needed assistance." The revelation transformed Marcus's understanding of their situation. This wasn't an isolated incident, but a pattern of behavior that the airline had apparently known about and failed to address. "Did any of you pursue legal action?" he asked Tanya. She shook her head. "I consulted an attorney, but as an individual against a corporate giant, the cost would have been prohibitive, and they said these cases are difficult to prove." Marcus shared details of his meeting with Pierce and the settlement offer, including the confidentiality provisions that would prevent them from advocating for systemic change. "They want to buy our silence," Olivia concluded, anger evident in her voice. "While this keeps happening to other families." As they discussed options, Marcus's phone chimed with a message from Daniel, the hesitant flight attendant. "I've been thinking about what happened. There's more you should know. Skyway has a pattern of dismissing complaints from minority passengers. I have documentation if you're pursuing this further. This potential insider information could be crucial." Marcus showed the message to Olivia and Tanya. "This is bigger than just our experience," Olivia said quietly, looking at her sleeping daughter. "What if the next family doesn't have a Dr. Keller on their flight? What if the next baby doesn't recover? Later that evening, Marcus received a call from his firm's managing partner, Robert Sanderson. "I understand you met with Jonathan Pierce. Today," Sanderson began without preamble. "He speaks highly of you, says you handled a difficult situation professionally." "It was a preliminary discussion," Marcus replied carefully. "Look, Marcus, I know this is personal for you," Sanderson continued, "but the Skyway account would be transformative for the firm. 7 figures annually, minimum. The partnership track implications for you are significant." The subtext was unmistakable. Pursuing action against Skyway could derail Marcus's career advancement at his firm. "Are you asking me to prioritize the firm's business interests over my family's experience with discrimination?" Marcus asked directly. Sanderson's sigh was audible. "I'm suggesting that there are ways to resolve personal matters that don't jeopardize professional relationships. Pierce mentioned they made a generous offer. That seems like a win-win solution." After ending the call, Marcus sat in his home office, the weight of the decision before him growing heavier. The settlement would provide financial security and avoid career complications, but it would also silence them, allowing Skyway to continue its discriminatory practices without accountability. His reflection was interrupted by Olivia, who entered, carrying a now-awake Zora. Something in his expression must have revealed his thoughts. "They're pressuring you at the firm, aren't they?" she asked quietly. Marcus nodded. "Not explicitly, but the message is clear. Taking on Skyway could mean walking away from partnership track." Olivia sat beside him, placing Zora gently in his arms. The baby gurgled happily, showing no lasting trauma from her ordeal, though her parents carried the scars. "Whatever you decide, I support you," Olivia said. "But I keep thinking about Tanya's son and the other families who reached out and who else might be next. We have the resources and knowledge to fight this. Not everyone does." Marcus looked down at his daughter, remembering the terror of watching her struggle to breathe while help was denied because of the color of her skin. In that moment, his path became clear. "I need to call Amara Washington," he said, referring to a former classmate who had become a prominent civil rights attorney. "This isn't just about us anymore." The decision would have profound implications for their lives, his career, and ultimately for how corporations like Skyway would be held accountable for systemic discrimination. What had begun as a family vacation had transformed into something much larger, a fight for justice that would test their resolve, challenge powerful interests, and potentially change industry practices forever. The offices of Washington Civil Rights Law Group occupied the 10th floor of a modest building in downtown Chicago, a stark contrast to Skyway's gleaming corporate tower. Amara Washington had built her reputation representing individuals against powerful institutions, earning both respect and animosity in legal circles for her unwavering commitment to justice. "This isn't just discrimination," Amara stated after reviewing the evidence Marcus had gathered. "It's a pattern of negligence with potential criminal implications. Denying medical care based on race violates multiple federal laws." Marcus nodded, appreciating her directness. He'd known Amara since law school, where her brilliant legal mind and passion for civil rights had distinguished her from peers focused solely on corporate careers. Their paths had diverged professionally, but reconnected over occasional coffee meetings where they discussed the different worlds they operated in. "I've identified 7 other families with similar experiences on Skyway flights," Marcus explained. 4 involving the same flight attendant, Jessica Whitman. "Have you ever witnessed discrimination and felt powerless to stop it? Or have you stepped up to challenge injustice despite the personal cost? Comment number 1 if you've ever stood up against discrimination, or number 2 if you wish you had. Like and subscribe to see how the Carters build their case against a powerful corporation." Amara made notes in her precise handwriting. "We'll need to investigate Whitman's employment history. If Skyway received complaints about her and kept her in customer-facing roles, that strengthens our case for corporate liability." Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus worked secretly with Amara's team while maintaining his regular caseload at his firm. He hadn't yet informed his partners of his decision to pursue action against Skyway, knowing the potential blowback. Meanwhile, Olivia coordinated with the growing number of families coming forward with similar experiences. Daniel, the flight attendant who had witnessed Jessica's behavior, proved to be an invaluable resource. During a carefully arranged meeting at a quiet cafe far from Skyway's offices, he provided Marcus with disturbing insights. "The company has a complaint tracking system," Daniel explained nervously, glancing around to ensure they weren't observed. "I worked in customer relations before becoming a flight attendant. There's a clear pattern in how complaints are handled." He slid a flash drive across the table. "These are screenshots from our internal system. I've removed identifying information, except race markers. 78% of complaints from passengers identified as minorities resulted in no action designations, compared to 23% from white passengers." The data was damning, revealing a systematic dismissal of concerns raised by Black, Hispanic, and Middle Eastern passengers. Even more disturbing were the internal communications regarding Jessica Whitman. "She's had 12 formal complaints for discriminatory behavior in the past 18 months, Daniel continued. "But she's also consistently rated highest for premium passenger satisfaction, meaning the wealthy white passengers in first class love her. Management decided that metric was more important." "Why are you doing this?" Marcus asked directly. "You're risking your job." Daniel's expression turned somber. "My sister has a daughter about your baby's age. Watching what happened on that flight, I couldn't sleep afterward. Some things matter more than a paycheck." Amara's team meticulously documented each piece of evidence, building a comprehensive picture of systemic discrimination that went far beyond the Carters' individual experience. The investigation uncovered troubling details about Skyway's corporate culture and training practices. "They have something called preferred passenger profiles in their training materials," Amara explained during a strategy session in her office. "It essentially teaches flight attendants to prioritize certain types of customers based on revenue potential and loyalty likelihood, but the descriptions are thinly veiled racial profiles." As the case built momentum, so did the resistance. Marcus began noticing subtle changes at his firm: being excluded from key meetings, assignments redirected to other attorneys, coolness from partners who had previously been mentors. The message was clear without being explicit. His pursuit of Skyway was noticed and disapproved. Olivia faced her own challenges. What had begun as nightmares about Zora's emergency had evolved into symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety in crowded spaces, hypervigilance around her daughter, panic attacks triggered by sounds similar to airplane cabin noises. She had returned to work part-time at the hospital, but found herself struggling when treating infants in respiratory distress. Yet amid these difficulties, she found unexpected purpose in connecting with other families affected by similar discrimination. Weekly support group meetings in their living room became a source of healing and empowerment for parents who had previously felt isolated in their experiences. "It wasn't until I heard your story that I realized it wasn't just bad luck or a rude employee," shared Monica Diaz, whose son had been denied assistance during a seizure on a Skyway flight. "It was discrimination, and it was wrong, and it wasn't my fault." These connections strengthened the Carters' resolve, transforming their pursuit from personal vindication to collective justice. Each family's story reinforced the pattern, creating a mosaic of discrimination that would be difficult for any court or regulatory body to ignore. The case took an unexpected turn when social media caught wind of their investigation. A hashtag, "chart denied in the sky," began trending after one event. The affected families shared their experience online. Within days, dozens more accounts emerged from passengers who had witnessed or experienced discrimination on Skyway flights. Skyway's response was swift and aggressive. Their PR team released statements emphasizing their commitment to inclusive service and zero tolerance for discrimination, while subtly suggesting that the claims were exaggerated or motivated by financial gain. Jessica Whitman gave a carefully orchestrated interview with a friendly media outlet, presenting herself as a dedicated professional, being scapegoated for standard protocol decisions. More concerning were the anonymous threats that began arriving. At the Carters' home and Amara's office, emails with disturbing content, unmarked packages that proved harmless but unsettling, Suspicious vehicles parked outside their residence. Local police took reports but had little to offer beyond increased patrols. "This is standard intimidation tactics," Amara assured them after a particularly threatening email. "It means we're making them nervous. We've struck a nerve." Despite the pressure, their investigation continued to uncover damning evidence. A former Skyway training supervisor provided documentation of how customer complaints were systematically downgraded or dismissed based on the passenger's perceived status or race. Internal communications revealed executives joking about high maintenance, minority passengers whose concerns could be safely ignored. The most significant development came when Marcus received an anonymous email containing court records from a sealed case 5 years earlier. Jonathan Pierce, Skyway's current CEO, had been sued for racial discrimination at his previous company. The case had been settled with a strict confidentiality agreement, but the documents provided a disturbing glimpse into Pierce's personal views on diversity and inclusion. This explains why the discrimination is so deeply embedded in Skyway's culture, Amara noted as they reviewed the documents. It starts at the top. 4 weeks into their investigation, Marcus was summoned to an unexpected meeting with all senior partners at his firm. The tension in the boardroom was palpable as Robert Sanderson addressed him directly. "Marcus, it's come to our attention that you're actively building a case against Skyway Airlines, despite our firm's ongoing business relationship negotiations. This presents an untenable conflict of interest." Marcus had anticipated this confrontation. "I disclosed my family's experience to you immediately after it occurred. The firm made no move to recuse itself from Skyway discussions at that time. There's a difference between having a personal customer service complaint and secretly collaborating with Amara Washington on what appears to be a class action lawsuit," another partner interjected. "This directly undermines the firm's business interests." Sanderson's expression was regretful but firm. "We've always valued your work, Marcus, but this situation forces us to make a difficult decision. You have a choice. Discontinue your involvement in any action against Skyway or take a leave of absence from the firm." The ultimatum wasn't surprising, but the reality of it still landed with force. Years of dedicated work, billable hours, sacrificed weekends, all leading to this crossroads where professional advancement collided with personal principles. "I understand," Marcus replied calmly. "I'll clear out my office this afternoon." That evening, as he explained the development to Olivia, he expected disappointment or worry. Their financial situation would be significantly impacted, and the security they had built was now uncertain. Instead, she surprised him by producing a spreadsheet. "I've been running the numbers," she explained. "My salary can cover our essential expenses for 8 months. Our savings will last another 6. That gives you 14 months to pursue this case without financial pressure." Marcus stared at his wife, overwhelmed by her support and foresight. "Liv, are you sure? This could affect your career too if Skyway decides to target the hospital with their influence." "Let them try," Olivia replied with quiet determination. "Some of the hospital board members have grandchildren who've been my patients. Besides, what's the alternative? Let them discriminate against other families? Let the next baby suffer because we were afraid of career consequences?" Their conversation was interrupted by a call from Amara. "We've got something big," she announced without preamble. "Daniel recorded a meeting after your incident. Executive-level discussion about covering up discrimination complaints, specific mention of your case, and direct orders to make it go away at any cost. This is the smoking gun, Marcus." The recording would be crucial evidence for their case, directly linking corporate leadership to the systematic discrimination they had uncovered. The path forward was clear, despite the personal and professional costs already incurred and those still to come. As news of Marcus's departure from his firm spread through legal circles, he received an unexpected call from Jonathan Pierce. "I've heard about your career development," Pierce stated, his tone a carefully calibrated mix of concern and authority. "This situation has escalated unnecessarily, Marcus. We had hoped to resolve this amicably. Discrimination against families and children isn't something that gets resolved amicably with confidential settlements," Marcus replied evenly. "I'm prepared to improve our offer substantially," Pierce continued. 7 figures immediately transferable. No extended litigation, no career uncertainty. You're a smart man, Marcus. You understand the practical realities here. The offer was tempting. Financial security for his family, an end to the mounting pressure, a chance to return to the career path he had worked so hard to establish. But Marcus thought of the families he had met, the stories he had heard, the pattern that would continue if they accepted a private settlement. I appreciate the offer, Mr. Pierce, but this stopped being about money the moment we discovered how many other families experienced exactly what we did. Your airline has a systemic problem that needs to be addressed publicly, not buried under NDAs. Pierce's tone chilled. You're making a serious mistake. Taking on a corporation of our size is career suicide, especially now that you've left your firm. Be reasonable, Marcus. Think about your family's future. After ending the call, Marcus sat in the home office that had become his case headquarters, surrounded by evidence of corporate malfeasance and personal stories of discrimination. The path ahead would be challenging, financially, professionally, emotionally, but the alternative was unacceptable. The question now wasn't whether they would proceed, but how they would withstand the full force of a corporate giant determined to protect its reputation at any cost. The battle lines were drawn, and the true test of their resolve was about to begin. Would you risk your career and financial security to fight for justice, or would you take the money and move on? Comment number 1 if you'd fight no matter the cost, or number 2 if you'd accept the settlement. Subscribe now to see how this high-stakes legal battle unfolds in our next installment. The morning after Marcus declined Pierce's settlement offer, Skyway launched its counteroffensive with military precision. A press release appeared on major news outlets describing unfounded allegations being made against a respected airline by opportunistic individuals seeking financial gain. While carefully avoiding direct mention of the Carters or specific incidents, the implication was clear. By afternoon, business news channels featured interviews with Skyway's PR team, discussing the unfortunate trend of corporations being targeted by coordinated social media campaigns. Financial analysts speculated about the potential impact on Skyway's stock price, with several suggesting the allegations were likely exaggerated. Given the airline's strong diversity initiatives, the coordinated media blitz culminated with Jessica Whitman's tearful interview on a popular evening news program. Carefully coached and immaculately presented, she portrayed herself as a dedicated professional being victimized by false accusations. "I've dedicated my life to passenger safety," she said, dabbing at carefully crafted tears. "To be accused of something so contrary to everything I stand for is devastating. I would never, ever, endanger a child." The interviewer, clearly sympathetic, asked softball questions that allowed Jessica to present her version of events without challenge. The baby was fussy but showed no clear signs of distress. "I was following our medical assessment protocols exactly as trained. When Dr. Keller identified it as an emergency, I immediately provided all necessary assistance." No mention of her racist comments. No explanation for why she had ignored Olivia's medical assessment. No acknowledgement of the multiple previous complaints against her. Marcus watched the interview with Amara in her office, both taking detailed notes on the misrepresentations and outright lies. "Classic strategy," Amara observed. "Control the narrative, paint themselves as victims, discredit the accusers before they even speak. We expected this." "They're good," Marcus acknowledged. "Most viewers who don't know the details would find her convincing. Which is why we don't fight this battle in the media right now," Amara replied. "We continue building our case methodically. Let them exhaust their PR budget while we gather evidence that will stand up in court." The media campaign was only the most visible aspect of Skyway's counterattack. Less public but more concerning were the other tactics that began to unfold. Marcus's former colleagues suddenly became unavailable for professional courtesies or social engagements. Legal professionals who had previously expressed interest in the case began to distance themselves. Several potential expert witnesses, who had initially agreed to consult, suddenly developed scheduling conflicts. The financial pressure mounted quickly. Without his law firm salary, the Carters had to adjust their lifestyles significantly. Their mortgage, Zora's daycare, and healthcare costs consumed most of Olivia's income, leaving little margin for unexpected expenses. They postponed non-essential purchases, canceled their vacation plans for the following year, and began carefully monitoring every expense. More troubling were the mysterious reviews that Olivia's hospital suddenly initiated regarding her patient care practices. Though framed as routine quality assurance, the timing and unprecedented scrutiny suggested external influence. "They're reviewing charts from 2 years ago," Olivia told Marcus one evening, her voice tight with stress. "Dr. Patel warned me unofficially that someone's been asking questions about my record, looking for anything they could use against me." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Skyway has board members with connections to the hospital's corporate ownership. They're trying to pressure us through your job." "It won't work," Olivia stated firmly, though the dark circles under her eyes betrayed her exhaustion. "My patient care is impeccable. They can review every chart I've ever touched." Their home hadn't escaped attention either. Unusual activities suggested more than casual interest in their private lives. Unmarked vehicles parked across the street for hours, suspicious service workers in the neighborhood asking questions about the Carters, apparent attempts to access their home internet network. Amara arranged for a security expert to sweep their home and install protection measures. "Corporate espionage is standard in cases like this," she explained. "They're looking for anything they can use to discredit you or pressure you to drop the case." The surveillance extended to their digital lives as well. Both began experiencing unusual activity on their email and social media accounts. Login attempts from unknown locations, messages that disappeared, contacts reporting strange communications they hadn't sent. "They're trying to isolate you and make you feel watched," Amara explained when Marcus reported these incidents. "It's psychological warfare, designed to wear you down." Despite these pressures, their case continued to build momentum. Daniel's recording of the post-incident executive meeting proved invaluable, capturing Skyway's leadership explicitly discussing how to contain the situation and prevent it from becoming a racial issue in the media. Most damning was a vice president's casual comment. "This isn't the first time Jessica's had issues with these people. Maybe we should move her to routes with fewer of them." The recording captured uncomfortable laughter, followed by agreement to keep her on premium routes where she connects well with our high-value passengers. The evidence of systematic discrimination extended beyond Jessica to Skyway's corporate culture. Former employees began coming forward with accounts of racial bias in hiring, promotion, and passenger service policies. Statistical analysis of complaint resolution revealed clear disparities in how issues were handled based on passengers' perceived race and socioeconomic status. 6 weeks into building their case, the Carters' efforts gained unexpected public visibility when a major news magazine published an investigative piece titled, "Denied in the Sky, Discrimination at 35,000 Feet. The article, which had been in development before the Carters' incident, now included their experience alongside dozens of others, creating a comprehensive picture of discrimination across multiple airlines, with Skyway featuring prominently. The public response was immediate and polarized. Social media exploded with both support for the affected families and skepticism about their claims. Skyway's stock dropped 11% in 2 days as investors reacted to the potential liability and reputational damage. Skyway's response was equally swift. They announced the formation of a passenger equality task force and promised a comprehensive review of service policies. Jessica Whitman was placed on extended leave pending investigation, a move Amara described as too little, too late, and obviously reactive rather than principled. More concerning was the aggressive legal strategy that unfolded behind the scenes. Skyway's legal team filed motions challenging the admissibility of Daniel's recording, claiming it violated privacy laws and employee confidentiality agreements. They demanded extensive and burdensome discovery from each family involved, requesting years of medical records, financial information, and personal communications that far exceeded reasonable relevance to the case. "They're trying to drown us in paperwork and invade your privacy to the point that continuing feels too costly," Amara explained during a strategy session. "It's a war of attrition." The pressure tactics extended to potential witnesses as well. Dr. Keller reported being contacted by Skyway's attorneys with veiled suggestions that his medical practice could face regulatory scrutiny if his testimony damaged the airline. Other passengers who had offered statements suddenly became hesitant, citing concerns about being drawn into prolonged litigation. 8 weeks into the battle, Marcus received an unexpected visitor at the small office space he had rented to manage the case. William Hartman, a retired Skyway executive who had left the company 3 years earlier, arrived unannounced with a leather portfolio under his arm. "I've been watching what's happening," Hartman stated after introducing himself. "I left Skyway because I couldn't stomach the direction Pierce was taking the company. What happened to your family was terrible, but not surprising to anyone who understood the culture he was building." The portfolio contained detailed records of discriminatory practices implemented under Pierce's leadership, modified service protocols for passengers based on racial and economic profiling, training materials with coded language about managing difficult demographics, and internal metrics that rewarded staff for prioritizing certain passengers over others. "Pierce brought these practices from his previous company," Hartman explained. "I objected and was gradually sidelined until retirement became my only option. I kept these records because I knew eventually someone would need to hold them accountable." This insider information provided crucial context for the pattern they had been documenting, connecting individual incidents to corporate policy decisions. It was exactly the kind of evidence that could transform their case from anecdotal complaints to systemic corporate liability. As Marcus integrated this new information into their case strategy, Olivia continued coordinating the growing network of affected families. What had begun as a handful of similar experiences had expanded to over 30 documented incidents, creating a powerful collective narrative of discrimination that spanned years and multiple Skyway routes. The toll on their personal lives was significant. Both operated on minimal sleep, dividing their time between professional obligations, case development, and caring for Zora. Financial strain created constant background stress as their savings diminished faster than anticipated. Friends and family offered support, but the uncertainty of the outcome weighed heavily. 10 weeks into their fight, Marcus received another call from Jonathan Pierce. "This has gone on long enough," the CEO stated without preamble. "The media attention is disruptive, and these proceedings aren't beneficial for anyone. I'm prepared to make an unprecedented offer." The figure Pierce named was staggering. 8 figures accompanied by guaranteed positions on Skyway's new passenger equality task force for both Marcus and Olivia, giving them direct input into policy changes. "This would allow you to make the systemic changes you're advocating for while securing your family's financial future," Pierce argued reasonably. "A protracted legal battle might feel righteous, but what tangible changes will it actually produce, and at what cost to your family?" It was a masterfully crafted offer, addressing both their financial concerns and their desire for meaningful change. The task force position would provide a platform to influence policy directly, rather than forcing change through external pressure. On the surface, it appeared to give them everything they wanted, except for one critical element: accountability. "The offer is generous," Marcus acknowledged, "but I notice it doesn't include any public acknowledgement of wrongdoing or discrimination." "Legal liability considerations make that impossible," Pierce replied smoothly. "But the compensation and your role in shaping future policy speak louder than any public statement could." The unspoken reality hung between them. Accepting this offer would allow Skyway to present the outcome as a collaborative improvement initiative rather than a response to documented discrimination. The narrative would become one of voluntary corporate responsibility rather than accountability for harmful practices. "I'll discuss it with my wife and our attorney," Marcus responded neutrally. That evening, as they considered the offer, Olivia articulated the core dilemma. "This would solve our financial problems and give us a voice in their policies, but it would also let them control the narrative. No one would ever know what really happened or why they suddenly cared about passenger equality." Marcus nodded. "And the confidentiality provisions would prevent us from discussing our experience or the evidence we've gathered. All those other families would lose their most compelling evidence for their own cases." The ethical question was complex. Did they have a responsibility to pursue public accountability, even at personal cost? Or would accepting this offer allow them to effect change from within the system, potentially helping more passengers in the long run? As they debated these questions, Amara called with news that would fundamentally alter their decision calculus. The FBI had opened an investigation into potential wire fraud and civil rights violations at Skyway, based on evidence they had helped gather. This just became much bigger than our civil case, Amara explained. Federal investigators are looking into whether Skyway's leadership knowingly made false statements to government agencies about their non-discrimination policies while accepting federal contracts that required adherence to those policies. This development transformed the landscape entirely. What had begun as their personal pursuit of justice had uncovered potential criminal violations that would now be investigated. Regardless of their individual case's outcome, the choice became clearer. Accepting Pierce's offer and its confidentiality provisions could potentially interfere with a federal investigation. More importantly, it would prevent the full truth from emerging about practices that had affected countless families. Marcus called Pierce the next morning. "We appreciate the offer, but we'll be declining. This case needs to proceed through proper legal channels with full transparency." Pierce's carefully maintained professional tone slipped. "For the first time, you're making a catastrophic mistake. We were offering you a chance to effect real change while providing for your family's future. Now you'll get neither." "What we'll get is the truth on public record," Marcus replied evenly, "and that's worth more than any settlement." The decision to proceed set in motion the next phase of their battle, formal legal proceedings that would test not only the evidence they had gathered, but also the judicial system's willingness to hold a powerful corporation accountable. Amara filed their class action lawsuit the following week, representing the Carters and 27 other families who had experienced similar discrimination. The complaint detailed Skyway's pattern of racial bias in passenger treatment, the corporate policies that enabled it, and the systematic dismissal of complaints from minority passengers. Skyway's response was immediate and overwhelming. Their legal team, comprising attorneys from 3 prestigious firms, filed multiple motions to dismiss, arguing everything from lack of standing to failure to exhaust administrative remedies. They demanded the case be broken into individual complaints, rather than proceeding as a class action, a strategy designed to drain resources and diminish the impact of the pattern evidence. As the legal battle intensified in the courts, Skyway escalated its public relations campaign. Industry analysts appeared on business news programs questioning the economic impact of frivolous lawsuits on ticket prices. Opinion pieces suggesting the plaintiffs were exploiting racial tensions for financial gain appeared in major publications. Social media campaigns attempted to paint the Carters as opportunistic attention seekers rather than parents seeking accountability. The pressure on their personal lives increased proportionally. Marcus discovered that potential clients were being quietly discouraged from retaining his services by suggestions that he was distracted or pursuing a personal vendetta. Olivia faced increasingly hostile work conditions as the hospital administration found subtle ways to express their displeasure with the attention her case was bringing. Financial strain became a daily reality. Their savings dwindled faster than anticipated as case expenses mounted, and Marcus's independent legal practice struggled to establish itself in the face of industry headwinds. They downsized vehicles, eliminated non-essential expenses, and began considering whether they could maintain their home. "They're trying to break us financially before we can get to trial," Marcus observed one evening as they reviewed their dwindling resources. "It's a classic strategy against individual plaintiffs." Olivia nodded, bouncing Zora gently as she prepared her for bed. "They don't realize that some things matter more than money. Like knowing our daughter will grow up in a world where she can't be denied help because of her skin color." Despite the mounting pressure, unexpected support emerged from various quarters. A legal defense fund established by civil rights organizations raised money to help cover the family's legal expenses. Several high-profile attorneys offered pro bono assistance with specific aspects of the case. Former Skyway employees continued to come forward with evidence of discriminatory practices, each new account strengthening the pattern they were establishing. The most surprising development came 3 months into the legal proceedings when a major Skyway shareholder, institutional investor BlackRock Capital, publicly questioned the airline's handling of the discrimination allegations. Their statement expressed concern about potential governance failures that create both ethical and financial risks for investors, and requested a special board meeting to discuss the matter. This intervention from a powerful financial player sent Skyway's stock tumbling and created the first cracks in what had previously been a unified corporate front. Leaked reports suggested board members were divided on how to proceed, with some advocating for settlement and policy changes while others remained committed to aggressive resistance. As the case progressed toward trial, Skyway made a final attempt to prevent public examination of their practices. A new settlement offer arrived, even larger than before, and with fewer restrictions on the Carters' ability to speak about their experience. The offer did not, however, include any admission of wrongdoing or commitment to specific policy changes. "They're getting desperate," Amara noted when they discussed the offer. "Our evidence is strong, and they know it. If this reaches trial, everything becomes public record. Their internal communications, their training materials, their complaint dismissal patterns." The Carters declined the offer, committed to seeing the process through to its conclusion despite the personal cost. Their decision was affirmed when the judge denied Skyway's final attempt to have the case dismissed, clearing the path for trial. As they prepared for the courtroom battle ahead, Marcus and Olivia found strength in the community that had formed around their case. The other families who had joined the lawsuit had become a support network, sharing resources, emotional support, and a common commitment to accountability. Their collective resolve proved stronger than the corporate resources aligned against them. The night before trial was set to begin. As they finalized preparations in Amara's office, Marcus received an unexpected message from Daniel, who had been strategically reassigned to international routes after providing his evidence. "Whatever happens tomorrow," the flight attendant wrote, "you've already changed things. People inside the company are talking differently. Some of us are finding courage because of you. The truth matters even when it's costly." It was a timely reminder of why they had refused to be silenced, despite the enormous pressure to accept private settlement. Some battles needed to be fought in the light of public accountability, regardless of the personal cost. The truth about Skyway's discrimination deserved to be on public record, not buried under confidential settlements and corporate spin. As they left the office that evening, ready to face whatever the trial would bring, Olivia took Marcus's hand. "Remember when this was just about our vacation to Paris?" He smiled wryly. "Seems like another lifetime." "No matter what happens tomorrow," she said, "I'm proud of us for standing up. Zora will know her parents fought for what was right, not what was easy." The battle had already cost them professionally, financially, and emotionally. The outcome remained uncertain. But in refusing to be silenced by corporate power, they had already achieved something significant. They had shown that some injustices cannot be buried under settlements or intimidation, that some truths demand to be heard, regardless of the forces aligned against them. Tomorrow would bring the next chapter in their fight for accountability, a public reckoning that Skyway had spent millions trying to prevent. The system that had failed their daughter would finally face judgment in the full light of public scrutiny. The federal courthouse in downtown Chicago buzzed with activity as the Carter versus Skyway Airlines trial began. Media trucks lined the street, reporters jostled for position on the courthouse steps, and protesters on both sides held signs expressing their views on the high-profile discrimination case. Court officers maintained tight security, checking credentials carefully as spectators filled the gallery to capacity. Inside the imposing courtroom, the contrast between the opposing legal teams was immediately apparent. Skyway's defense comprised 12 attorneys from prestigious firms, armed with digital presentation systems and multiple paralegals managing documents. Across the aisle, Amara Washington led a smaller but determined team representing the plaintiff families, their modest setup belying the strength of their case. Judge Eleanor Harrington, known for her no-nonsense approach and impeccable fairness, surveyed the packed courtroom with a measured gaze. "This court will maintain decorum throughout these proceedings," she announced firmly. "The serious nature of these allegations demands our highest professional standards." The opening statements set the tone for the battle ahead. Skyway's lead counsel, Gregory Thompson, a silver-haired litigator with a reputation for aggressive defense, presented the airline as a victim of misunderstanding and opportunism. "Your Honor, Skyway Airlines serves millions of passengers annually with dedication to safety and customer satisfaction," Thompson began smoothly. This case represents isolated incidents being mischaracterized as systemic issues. The evidence will show that Skyway's policies explicitly prohibit discrimination of any kind, and that the company responds appropriately to all passenger concerns regardless of background. Amara's opening statement cut through the corporate rhetoric with precision. This case is about a pattern of discrimination that starts at the top and filters through every level of Skyway's operations, she stated clearly. We will present evidence showing that Skyway not only failed to address discriminatory behavior, but created systems that encouraged it. When Olivia Carter, a medical professional, begged for help as her baby struggled to breathe, she was denied assistance because of her race. And this was not an isolated incident, but part of a documented pattern affecting dozens of families. The trial's first week focused on establishing the facts of the Carter family's experience. Olivia took the stand, her composure remarkable as she recounted the terror of watching Zora struggle to breathe, while Jessica Whitman repeatedly refused assistance. I identified myself as a pediatric nurse and described the symptoms of anaphylaxis, she testified steadily. I was told I was being dramatic and that your kind always overreacts. Meanwhile, my baby's lips were turning blue. Skyway's attorney cross-examined her aggressively, attempting to suggest she had exaggerated the emergency or failed to communicate clearly. Isn't it possible that in your parental concern, you misinterpreted Ms. Whitman's professional assessment of the situation? No, Olivia replied firmly. My assessment was later confirmed by both Dr. Keller and the emergency medical team in Newfoundland. My daughter was in anaphylactic shock. As a medical professional, I recognized the symptoms immediately, and Ms. Whitman dismissed them based on racial bias, not medical judgment. Marcus's testimony provided the legal framework for their case, methodically outlining the evidence of systematic discrimination they had uncovered. Despite attempts to discredit him as having a personal vendetta against the airline, his attorney's training showed in his precise responses and unflappable demeanor. Dr. Keller's testimony proved pivotal. As a respected emergency physician with no prior connection to the Carters, his account carried particular weight with both the judge and jury. In my professional opinion, the child was in clear respiratory distress consistent with anaphylaxis, he stated unequivocally. Mrs. Carter's assessment was entirely accurate. Had intervention been delayed much longer, the outcome could have been tragic. When asked about Jessica's response to his intervention, Dr. Keller's response was damning. There was an immediate change in attitude when I identified myself as a physician. The medical kit that had been denied to Mrs. Carter was provided to me without question. The difference in treatment was stark and appeared to be based solely on who was asking for help, not the medical situation itself. Jessica Whitman's testimony came in the trial's second week, carefully staged by Skyway's legal team. Dressed conservatively with subtle makeup that emphasized her apparent fatigue, she presented herself as a dedicated professional being unfairly villainized. Safety is always my first priority, she insisted. I followed our assessment protocols exactly as trained. When Dr. Keller identified a serious medical situation, I immediately provided all necessary assistance. Amara's cross-examination systematically dismantled this narrative. Ms. Whitman, records show you've had 12 formal complaints for similar behavior in the past 18 months, all from minority passengers. How do you explain this pattern? Objection, Thompson interjected. Prior complaints are prejudicial and unsubstantiated. Your Honor, Amara countered, these complaints go directly to establishing pattern and practice, which is central to our case. Judge Harrington considered briefly. Overruled. The witness will answer. Jessica shifted uncomfortably. I believe some passengers have cultural differences in how they express concerns. I treat everyone exactly the same. Amara produced transcripts of Jessica's previous responses to passenger complaints. You told a Hispanic mother whose child was having an asthma attack that she was making a scene. You told a Middle Eastern man requesting medical assistance for chest pain that he was disrupting other passengers. Yet records show you personally escorted a white businessman with a migraine to the galley for quiet recovery space. Do these reflect treating everyone exactly the same? As Jessica's Testimony crumbled under pointed questioning. The jury's expressions reflected growing skepticism about her credibility. By the time she left the stand, her carefully constructed image had been replaced by the reality of a flight attendant who consistently provided dramatically different levels of service based on passengers' race. The trial's most technical phase involved the statistical evidence of discrimination in Skyway's complaint resolution system. Expert witnesses presented analysis showing that complaints from minority passengers were 3.4 times more likely to be dismissed without action than identical complaints from white passengers. Skyway's defense team fought vigorously to exclude this evidence, arguing it lacked context about the nature of the complaints. Judge Harrington allowed it with the provision that both sides could present their interpretation of the statistical significance. "These numbers tell a clear story," testified Dr. Elaine Richardson, a renowned statistician. "The disparity in complaint resolution cannot be explained by any factor other than racial bias in the decision-making process. The pattern is consistent across all service categories and geographic regions." Throughout the proceedings, Skyway's legal team employed increasingly aggressive tactics. They filed multiple motions for mistrial on technical grounds. They challenged the admissibility of key evidence, particularly Daniel's recording of the executive meeting. They attempted to have certain witnesses declared hostile or incompetent. Most troublingly, they pursued a strategy of questioning the motives and integrity of the plaintiff families, suggesting they were coordinating stories for financial gain. This approach backfired when several jurors visibly reacted to the implication that parents would fabricate discrimination stories involving their children's safety. The trial took an unexpected turn when Judge Harrington herself began asking pointed questions about Skyway's corporate governance. Her inquiry into why the airline had retained Jessica, despite multiple complaints, suggested concerns about the company's internal oversight that went beyond the specific incidents being litigated. As the third week of trial began, rumors circulated about potential judicial impropriety. Anonymous sources suggested Judge Harrington had conflicts of interest. That should have disqualified her from the case. Financial news outlets reported questions about judicial impartiality without specific allegations. The coordinated nature of these attacks suggested an orchestrated attempt to undermine the judge's credibility. Judge Harrington addressed the issue directly in court. "I am aware of certain insinuations being made about this court's impartiality. Let me be absolutely clear. Any party believing they have grounds for recusal should file a formal motion, rather than engaging in media speculation. This court will not be intimidated or distracted from its duty to ensure a fair proceeding." The attempted character assassination of the judge reinforced the perception that Skyway was willing to employ any tactic to avoid accountability, further damaging their credibility with the jury. As the evidence mounted against Skyway, Marcus made a strategic decision that surprised both the defense team and the media. Rather than focusing exclusively on Jessica Whitman's individual actions, he shifted emphasis to the corporate policies and culture that enabled and protected discriminatory behavior. "This case isn't ultimately about one flight attendant," he explained to the jury during his testimony. "It's about a system that trained her to prioritize certain passengers over others, that dismissed complaints from minority customers, and that kept her in position to discriminate despite knowing about her behavior. The problem starts at the top." This approach effectively neutralized Skyway's strategy of portraying Jessica as a bad apple, whose actions didn't reflect company policy. By connecting her behavior to specific training materials, complaint resolution protocols, and executive decisions, Marcus established the corporate liability that Skyway had worked so hard to avoid. The most dramatic moment of the trial came during the testimony of Benjamin Taylor, Skyway's vice president of customer experience. Under intense questioning from Amara, Taylor eventually admitted that the airline maintained passenger profiles that included racial and ethnic identifiers used to customize service delivery. "So Skyway explicitly instructs its staff to provide different levels of service based partly on racial categories?" Amara pressed. "We use demographic information to tailor the customer experience appropriately," Taylor responded defensively. "And these tailored experiences include whether medical concerns are treated as emergencies or as overreactions," Amara continued. After a long pause, Taylor attempted to deflect. "Individual employees may misinterpret guidance. The admission that racial profiling was built into Skyway's service model sent shockwaves through the courtroom. Several jurors visibly reacted, one shaking her head in apparent disbelief. Judge Harrington made extensive notes, her expression grave. The final phase of the trial brought CEO Jonathan Pierce to the stand. Impeccably dressed and projecting confident authority, he initially maintained the company's position that any discrimination was contrary to official policy and represented individual failures rather than systemic issues. Under Amara's methodical questioning, however, his carefully constructed facade began to crack. When presented with internal communications showing he had personally intervened to protect Jessica from disciplinary action after previous complaints, Pierce became visibly uncomfortable. "You were aware of Ms. Whitman's history of complaints from minority passengers, correct?" Amara asked. "I received summary reports on numerous personnel matters," Pierce responded evasively. Amara produced an email from Pierce to Human Resources. "Jessica consistently receives excellent feedback from our premium passengers. The occasional cultural misunderstanding shouldn't overshadow her value to our first-class experience." "Can you explain what you meant by cultural misunderstanding?" Amara asked. Pierce's composure slipped momentarily. "Some passengers have different expectations of service that may lead to misinterpreting standard procedures. Different expectations like receiving medical assistance for a baby in respiratory distress?" Amara pressed, as Pierce struggled to maintain his corporate messaging under increasingly specific questioning about his knowledge and actions. The jury's attention remained fixed on his responses. His testimony concluded with the impression of an executive who had been aware of discriminatory practices, but considered them acceptable business trade-offs to please premium customers. In closing arguments, Skyway's attorney attempted to reframe the narrative, emphasizing the company's written non-discrimination policies and characterizing any problems as implementation failures rather than intentional discrimination. "No company is perfect," Thompson concluded, "but Skyway has demonstrated its commitment to improvement through its new Passenger Equality Task Force and enhanced training programs." Amara's closing argument cut through these platitudes with laser precision. "Skyway wants you to focus on their written policies rather than their actual practices," she told the jury. "They want you to believe that what happened to the Carter family and dozens of others was an unfortunate aberration, rather than the predictable result of a system designed to prioritize certain passengers over others based on race and perceived status." She walked the jury methodically through the evidence. The statistical disparities in complaint resolution, the internal communications revealing bias at the executive level, the training materials that encouraged racial profiling, disguised as customer experience customization, and the human cost to families who had been denied assistance in moments of genuine need. "This case ultimately asks a simple question," she concluded. "In America, should a corporation be permitted to provide different levels of safety and care based on the color of a passenger's skin? Your verdict will answer that question not just for the families in this courtroom, but for millions of travelers who trust airlines with their safety every day." As the jury began deliberations, the atmosphere in the courtroom remained tense. Skyway's stock had fallen steadily throughout the trial, as damaging evidence became public. Industry analysts speculated about the potential financial impact of an adverse verdict, with estimates ranging from hundreds of millions in direct damages to billions in lost business and brand value. For the Carters and the other plaintiff families, the weight was excruciating. They had sacrificed enormously to reach this point. Careers disrupted, finances strained, privacy invaded, and emotional reserves depleted by the constant pressure of fighting a corporate giant. The verdict would determine not only their individual compensation, but also whether the system that had failed them would be forced to change. As deliberations extended into a second day, rumors of a divided jury circulated. Media speculation ran rampant, with commentators offering contradictory predictions about the outcome. Skyway's PR team continued its aggressive campaign to shape public perception, while civil rights organizations rallied support for the plaintiffs. On the morning of the third day, word came that the jury had reached a verdict. The courtroom filled quickly as all parties took their places, the tension palpable as Judge Harrington called the court to order. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" she asked the foreperson, a retired school principal who had listened attentively throughout the proceedings. "We have, Your Honor," he confirmed, handing the verdict form to the bailiff. As Judge Harrington reviewed the document, her expression revealed nothing. The courtroom held its collective breath, awaiting the decision that would conclude this phase of a battle that had begun with a baby's distress at 35,000 feet and evolved into a landmark case about corporate accountability for discrimination. The moment of truth had arrived, and with it, the answer to whether justice would prevail against one of the most powerful corporations in the transportation industry. On the matter of Carter et al. Versus Skyway Airlines, we the jury find in favor of the plaintiffs. The four-person's words resonated through the hushed courtroom, triggering a wave of reactions, gasps from spectators, embraces among the plaintiff families, and stone-faced silence from Skyway's executive team. Marcus reached for Olivia's hand, their fingers intertwining in a grip that conveyed everything words couldn't express in that moment. Judge Harrington proceeded methodically through the verdict form. On the claim of negligence, the jury finds for the plaintiffs. On the claim of discriminatory practices in violation of federal law, the jury finds for the plaintiffs. On the claim of corporate liability for creating and maintaining discriminatory systems, the jury finds for the plaintiffs. With each pronouncement, the reality solidified. They had won on every count. The system that had failed their daughter had been held accountable in the most public way possible. The damages phase triggered audible reactions throughout the courtroom. The jury awarded $3.5 million to the Carter family for their direct claims, plus additional compensation for emotional distress and punitive damages. The other plaintiff families received similar substantial awards. But the most significant figure came last: punitive damages against Skyway Airlines totaling $175 million, one of the largest discrimination verdicts in aviation history. The jury has determined that this amount is necessary to ensure corporate accountability and prevent similar discriminatory practices in the future, the foreperson explained when asked by Judge Harrington about the substantial figure. Our deliberations concluded that only significant financial consequences would motivate meaningful change. Beyond the monetary awards, the jury recommended a court-monitored overhaul of Skyway's training, complaint resolution, and accountability systems. This unprecedented level of external oversight would ensure that promises of reform became reality rather than public relations exercises. Outside the courthouse, Marcus addressed the assembled media with Olivia at his side, Zora safely with family away from the cameras. "Today's verdict isn't about money," he stated clearly. "It's about establishing that corporations cannot treat people differently based on race, even at 35,000 feet. No family should ever experience what we and the other plaintiffs endured." The fallout was immediate and far-reaching. Skyway's stock plummeted 28% by market close, triggering emergency board meetings. By evening, news broke that Jessica Whitman had been terminated, along with 3 executives implicated in covering up discrimination complaints. CEO Jonathan Pierce announced an extended leave of absence that industry insiders recognized as the first step toward permanent departure. Criminal investigations intensified in the verdict's wake. The Department of Justice expanded its inquiry into whether Skyway had committed fraud by certifying compliance with non-discrimination requirements for federal contracts while knowingly operating discriminatory systems. Several executives faced potential individual liability for their role in suppressing evidence and misleading investigators. For the Carters, the verdict brought vindication, but not closure. They recognized that their responsibility extended beyond their individual case to ensuring lasting industry change. Rather than retreating into private life after their ordeal, they made a decision that surprised many observers. "We're establishing the Carter Family Foundation for Equal Treatment," Marcus announced at a press conference 1 week after the verdict. "We'll use the majority of our settlement to fund advocacy, education, and legal support for families experiencing discrimination in transportation and public accommodations." The foundation's mission reflected their understanding that individual lawsuits, while powerful, couldn't address the systemic issues that allowed discrimination to flourish across industries. By creating an organization dedicated to both supporting affected families and advocating for policy changes, they transformed their personal victory into a platform for broader social impact. Dr. Keller, whose intervention had saved Zora's life, agreed to serve on the Foundation's board, alongside civil rights leaders and corporate accountability experts. His participation symbolized the importance of allies willing to use their privilege and position to confront discrimination when they witnessed it. What happened on that flight wasn't just about one family or one employee, Dr. Keller stated, at the Foundation's launch. It was about who we are as a society and whether we're willing to accept different standards of care and safety based on race. The answer must be an unequivocal no. Skyway's transformation began under intense public and regulatory scrutiny. A court-appointed monitor ensured compliance with the mandated reforms, which included comprehensive retraining of all customer-facing staff, restructuring of the complaint resolution system, and implementation of anonymous testing to identify and address discriminatory practices. Perhaps most significantly, Daniel, the flight attendant whose conscience had led him to document Jessica's behavior, was promoted to lead Skyway's newly established diversity and inclusion training division. His intimate knowledge of the company's previous failings made him uniquely qualified to guide meaningful reform rather than cosmetic changes. Real change requires honesty about where we've failed, Daniel explained in his first company-wide address. We can't build a truly inclusive airline without acknowledging the harm our previous practices caused and taking concrete steps to ensure it never happens again. The ripple effects extended throughout the airline industry. Other carriers, recognizing their vulnerability to similar litigation, proactively reviewed their own training and complaint resolution systems. Industry associations developed new, best practices for ensuring equitable treatment of all passengers, particularly in medical situations. The Federal Aviation Administration strengthened its oversight of airlines' non-discrimination compliance, creating more robust reporting requirements and consequences for violations. 1 year after the verdict, the Carters celebrated Zora's second birthday with a small gathering of family and friends. The toddler, with no memory of the ordeal that had changed her family's trajectory, delighted in the attention and cake, unaware of her role in a landmark case that had transformed an industry. As the celebration wound down, Marcus received a call from Amara with news that brought their journey full circle. A major civil rights law firm had offered him a partnership position leading their corporate accountability division. The role would allow him to leverage his experience to help other families facing similar battles against powerful entities. They were impressed by how you maintained focus on systemic change rather than just individual compensation, Amara explained. They need someone who understands both the legal and human dimensions of these cases. The offer represented professional redemption after the career sacrifices he had made to pursue their case. More importantly, it offered a path to continue the work they had started, using his legal expertise to dismantle discriminatory systems beyond the airline industry. That evening, after Zora was asleep, Marcus and Olivia sat on their porch discussing the developments of the past year and their path forward. Sometimes I still can't believe everything that happened from a trip we never even took, Olivia reflected, the night air cool against her skin. Paris will still be there when she's older, Marcus smiled, glancing toward their daughter's window. Maybe we'll try again next year. On a different airline, Olivia added with a wry smile. Actually, Marcus responded, I'd consider Skyway again. Not because I've forgotten what happened, but because the monitoring reports show they've made real changes. They're becoming the model for what we fought for, an industry where safety and dignity aren't determined by race. The following week, they boarded a flight for a Foundation-related speaking engagement, Zora securely in Olivia's arms. As they settled into their seats, the flight attendant approached with a warm, professional smile. Ms. Carter, Mr. Carter, welcome aboard. We're honored to have you flying with us today. Is there anything your family needs before takeoff? The simple courtesy, delivered with genuine respect, represented everything they had fought for. Not special treatment, but the basic human dignity that every passenger deserved regardless of race, status, or circumstance. It was a small moment, but it symbolized the broader changes their struggle had helped create. As the plane ascended, Olivia gazed at Zora, now a vibrant toddler fascinated by the clouds outside the window. The journey that had begun with terror at 35,000 feet had transformed into something neither of them could have imagined. Not just personal vindication, but a movement toward accountability that would protect countless families they would never meet. "Worth it," Olivia whispered, meeting Marcus's understanding gaze. Every difficult moment was worth it for this. Their story had transformed from a personal nightmare into a powerful reminder that justice, while often costly and never guaranteed, remains possible even against the most formidable opponents. By refusing to be silenced, they had created ripples of change that would continue long after their own case had faded from headlines, ensuring that the skies would be more equitable for all who followed. Have you ever stood up against injustice, even when it seemed impossible to win? Would you have fought like the Carters did, or taken the settlement and moved on? Comment below with your thoughts. If this story of courage and determination inspired you, please like, subscribe, and share it with others who need to hear that one family really can make a difference in the world. Thank you for joining me on this journey of justice at 35,000 feet. And remember, sometimes the most important battles are the ones that seem impossible to win. The Carter family's journey teaches us that fighting against discrimination requires unwavering courage and determination. Their story demonstrates how systemic racism thrives when people stay silent and corporations prioritize profits over humanity. Through their ordeal, we learn that accountability matters. Without it, discriminatory behaviors become entrenched in corporate cultures. The case highlights the power imbalance between corporations and individuals, yet proves that strategic persistence can overcome even massive resource disparities. It reveals how racial bias in service industries doesn't just cause inconvenience, but can create life-threatening situations when medical care is denied based on race. Perhaps most importantly, this story illustrates that creating lasting change requires looking beyond individual compensation to address root causes. The Carters transformed their personal trauma into structural reform by establishing a foundation, pushing for industry-wide policy changes, and creating accountability mechanisms. Their victory reminds us that justice is possible even against powerful opponents, but it often demands significant personal sacrifice. By refusing to be silenced, one family created a ripple effect of change that protects countless others from experiencing similar discrimination. Has racism or discrimination ever affected your life or someone you care about? What would you have done in the Carters' position? Fought through the courts or taken the settlement? Comment below with your thoughts or experiences. If this story of standing firm against injustice inspired you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more powerful stories of ordinary people creating extraordinary change. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that their voice matters in the fight against discrimination. Thank you for joining this important conversation about racism in everyday spaces. Remember, change happens when brave individuals refuse to accept injustice as normal, even at 35,000 feet.